ready when you're ready.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
I think.
During my years of traveling and reporting, one of the things I discovered was that from time to time, no matter how much I enjoyed a food, my body had an abnormal immune response, commonly known as a food allergy. And in fact, whether you travel a lot or not, it's important to understand the problem. One of the reports I read in connection with this program came from the Yale School of Medicine and dealt with reactions to specific foods and a test known as the Alcat Test. The Alcat Test was developed by a group of scientists at a company headquartered in South Florida. Now, I could have read the research and sent a film crew and a producer to check it out, but I'm not that kind of guy. If someone has to leave the gray, cold winter weather and fly all the way to warm, sunny Florida, it's my job to make that sacrifice. So I came here to see Roger Deutsch, who runs the company.
An allergy is a very acute and dramatic reaction to a food like peanut or crustacean. We eat it, we get hives, or the throat closes up immediately. That's an allergy. You don't really need a test for that. An intolerance is something a bit more nuanced. It could be that we don't have the enzyme to break down the sugar in milk, lactase, and so the milk sugar lactose causes irritation in the gut if we consume it. The sensitivity is something much more broad and definitely much more nuanced. It differs from an allergy primarily in that the symptom onset is delayed. It could be hours or even a couple of days before the symptoms occur. And the symptoms are not nearly as dramatic.
When I was a kid, I thought I was allergic to my family's cooking. And now I find out I'm only intolerant. How embarrassing. One of the stranger things I discovered when I was talking to Roger is that for some people, exercise can cause a reaction to a specific food. Accordingly, not eating for a few hours before you exercise could be a good idea. There's also something called cross-reactivity.
Cross-reactivity is when a person reacts to two different substances that share some molecular similarities. So for example, people who have sensitivities to latex may also have sensitivities to kiwi or bananas. People who have sensitivity to birch tree pollen may have allergies to apples. So they can eat apples most of the year, but when the birch trees are pollinating, it's too much of a loader in their system, and then they have an immunological response.
Also, if you find that watching the nightly news and finding out what our governments are doing with our tax money causes a rapid increase in your pulse rate, a sudden drop in your blood pressure, dizziness and nausea, could be cross-reactivity. Check with your doctor. Your body's response to a food it can't tolerate can be quite simple, like a rash, or as complex as cutting off your breathing. And in some cases, it can actually kill you. And very often, it's a response to the simplest foods, like milk or shellfish or eggs, or my stepmother's cooking. Oh, I mentioned that already, didn't I? The symptoms vary from person to person, as does the amount of food needed to trigger a reaction. Parts of the body's immune system binds to a group of food molecules and causes the release of inflammatory chemicals. In the United States, it is estimated that each year, up to 12 million people have reactions to food that result in over 30,000 emergency room visits. The more I researched the problem, the more I came across the phrase specific foods. But which specific foods? I wanted to know about the dangers way in advance of the problem.
Here lies Burt, who relished each dish. Discovered too late. Allergic to fish.
Every fruit or vegetable contains poisons to protect itself from pests. Nowadays, we eat foods from all over the world, every different time of year, and they're grown under different conditions. And they're also grown under conditions where they don't contain all the other nutrients that they would if they were grown, let's say, before the advent of industrial agriculture. And that means that our system gets less nourishment. So we have sort of a double whammy. We have foods we're not used to, or maybe are adulterated, and we have less of a capacity to detoxify them. So we might have an adverse response to those foods. If it passes through the liver and the toxins are not taken out, then the innate immune system gets called into action.
You may not have adequate amounts of some enzymes needed to digest certain foods. That's why many people have problems with milk. Bacteria in spoiled fish can trigger reactions. Some people have a problem with gluten in bread, pasta, and other foods containing wheat, barley, or rye. Certain food additives can cause reactions. My wife and my youngest son are both sensitive to MSG. As soon as we walk into our local Chinese restaurant, the chef recognizes and says, "No MSG!" Good man. In response to the problem, some countries require food producers to clearly inform consumers of their products' major allergens that might be contained in the food, or byproducts of major allergens. Some countries also require companies to warn consumers when food has been prepared near certain allergens that have been known to cause severe reactions. The European Union went even further and requires food businesses to provide allergy information on food sold unpackaged in delicatessens, bakeries, and fast food shops. Many people believe that a food allergy is just a dislike of a certain food. They don't realize that it can be a serious medical condition. Okay, in the interest of self-preservation, I have decided to have myself tested.
So, Mr. Burt, you come on in and take a seat.
Okay.
We're going to draw your blood.
Okay. If it works, great. If not, I hope to be remembered as having made an outstanding contribution to the history of television.
So we are done.
No lollipop?
I don't want to feel guilty if that comes in your test results and then you're going to blame me. So we enter your information in our lapses. It's a proprietary system that we have. I have a sample from an in-house draw that we have to process for today. We start with the first step, that is reading your white blood cells and your granulocytes.
Burt, the first thing we do with your blood is we run what we call a pre-analysis. And we want to see what your cellular composition is. We're really only interested in the white blood cells. We want to get the red blood cells out of the way because they're not involved in an immune reaction.
Okay, let me make sure I'm getting this right. You're taking my blood and you're measuring the white blood cells, the red blood cells, and the ones that are important are the white blood cells.
You got it.
So what happens next?
Next, your blood is placed inside a special tube that contains a substance which will actually grab the red cells, and when we centrifuge those, the red blood cells will then separate themselves from the white blood cells.
So what's happening here?
So now this machine is transferring your sample into all these individual 55 wells. The wells contain test substances, extracts of apple, beef, corn, celery, cucumber, etc., or the food additives. Your sample is going to intermingle with the test substances for a period of time at room temperature. In this laboratory, we do a number of different serology tests, and we're looking in the blood for certain markers that go along with our evaluation of gastrointestinal diseases. So your blood cells have had a chance to interact with all the different test reagents, and now we're going to read those reactions. So this machine will inject a liquid into each well, and then a reaction takes place there, which helps in the reading. And you'll see in a moment the appearance of the histogram, or the size distribution curve. Here's a control well. That's what your blood looks like just coming off the street. Nothing additional is added to it in terms of a test reagent. what it's going to tell us when we do a comparison is whether or not the exposure to the substance has caused the cells to react. And the reaction will be seen by a shift in the size. The cells may swell up to try and neutralize the particle that they think is dangerous. In the process, it may go a little bit further, and the cells are actually destroyed.
So what's happening in here?
So here's where we prepare the test substances. So of course, if we're starting with foods, we actually go to the market, buy the foods, put them in the lyophilizer, freeze dry them so that they're stable for a long time. Then we suspend them in liquid. And then when we put the test reagents into the wells, we know that we're putting in a substance that we understand its potency.
So you've gone to the market, you bought all of the stuff, you've prepared
Freeze dry
it here,
yeah.
And then that's what's going in to mix with my white blood corpuscles to see what's happening.
Exactly. So here's where the liquid test reagent gets put into cassette. So they draw the different substances and put them in a different substance into each well. And after they're dried, this is where your blood sample goes into the cassette.
So there were like 50 different things that my blood was tested against, and there'd be a chart like this for each one of them.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they mean red is a strong reaction. Orange is also a pretty moderate reaction. Yellow is in an intermediate range, and depending upon the context, may have to try and avoid those also, as you can. And green foods you can eat freely, and one of our nutritionists is going to go over that with you.
So here we're talking about sensitivities. And the thing to also keep in mind is the immune system is a dynamic, a changing system of the body. Everything that's reactive here, it's not necessarily the case that you'll need to avoid them forever.
Great.
Right, so we
How
would
about
go
2 days?
Well, I'm going to suggest a little longer than that.
Okay.
So I like to start with the good news first. So you have quite a variety, so I would invite you to take a look at these. Let's make sure that you enjoy a lot of these.
I love onions and shallots.
Great.
White potatoes are fine. Endive is one of my favorite foods. Okay.
So you have a nice variety of vegetables that you enjoy, and of course we would suggest that you also branch out and maybe have the others as well as you're not reactive to encourage a variety of foods, encourage a variety of nutrients into your body. Okay, so we see that you had a severe reaction to the things that are in the red column here. Those we would suggest that you avoid them for 6 months or more.
6 months.
6 months more would be best. So looking at this, I always like to ask what foods are significant for you in this list. That
Chicken, coffee.
Are you a coffee drinker daily? Yeah, I know a lot of people are. That's a tough one.
3 or 4 espressos a day.
That's a tough one. And normally I would suggest that we replace that caffeine with black tea, but you also had a reaction to that. So we might need to talk about how we incorporate that suggestion. You might want to do one thing at a time here. Now the moderate list, the recommendation here would be a 3 months or more avoidance. One thing I always like to point out is olive.
Right.
I didn't mention olive, but remember olive oil. So that oil would be best that you replace that for the 3 months or more. And here are some oils that you could use: almond oil, coconut oil, safflower oil,
Safflower oil is what I
walnut
use.
oil. You know, so you have a nice handful of sesame oil. You have a nice handful of oils that you could use to replace that sunflower oil.
I'm going to start on this, and then I will come back in 6 months, and we will reevaluate. But the key is, of course, my paying attention to what's going on in my body. Okay, I'm going to try and follow these instructions, and we'll report back how I feel. If you don't hear from me by the end of the week, send out the dogs. I know this program has had a lot of detailed information that might be hard to remember, so I put it all on the website, burtwolf.com. For Travels and Traditions, I'm Burt Wolf. But wait, there's more. Whenever we edit one of our programs, we always end up with more good material than we can fit in. Interviews, stories, recipes. So we decided to put them on our website, burtwolf.com.
Travels and Traditions with Burt Wolf is brought to you by the Swiss Institute for Health and Aging Well, originator of Swiss Element 365, a high flavanol chocolate developed as part of its continuing research to lower blood pressure and improve memory. And by Swiss International Airlines, flying to over 70 worldwide locations. Truly Swiss-made. Swiss International Airlines. And by the BMW European Delivery Program, a way to experience the roads that BMW was made to drive. BMW European Delivery Program. And by the Signet Foundation, raising funds for those in need through art-related initiatives, contributions to UNICEF and animal welfare organizations. The Signet Foundation.